Well, yeah, the last couple of weeks I have been in a short little series on the parable of the prodigal. Last week we looked at the father and his mercy and willingness to accept the wayward son back. The first week we had looked at the younger son, the wayward son. Last week we saw that the father even brings embarrassment on himself in receiving the son back. We established that this parable should really be called the parable of the father because this is a parable about the father and his grace and mercy way more than it is about the lost son. You see, Jesus is trying to get his audience to see the father in a whole new light. Now, this week we're going to look at the older brother because this is a lesson in jealousy and not understanding the father and, of course, not understanding our identity in him. All right, let's start reading from verse 21. The son said to him, "Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son." But the father said to his servants, "Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him, put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For the son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found." So he began to celebrate. Meanwhile, the older son was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of his servants and asked him, "What's going on?" "Your brother has come home," he replied, "and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound." The older brother became angry and refused to go in, so his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, "Look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders, yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours who has squandered your property with prostitutes comes home, you kill the fattened calf." "My son," the father said, "you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found." I want to go back for a minute and look at verse 12 that we looked at the first week, just real quickly, and then we'll get into this text. Verse 12 says this: "The younger one said to his father, 'Father, give me my share of the estate.' So he, being the father, divided his property between them." What's very interesting here in this first verse is that the property was divided between them, and in the original Greek language it's plural. So it appears that the older son received his share, which has led some commentators and scholars to suggest that the older brother is far less than innocent here. He got his share of the estate at the same time. Now, the custom of the day would have been that the older brother would have stepped in and would have tried to prevent the estate from being divided and sold. Be the voice of reason, if you will. And just like I said last week, the father had the right to prevent the sale of the land. Remember, the younger son had to sell it to get cash to go off. The older brother also could have intervened in that sale, but chose not to. So the older brother is a lot less innocent than it appears here in this section. At the very least, the older brother could have refused to share his estate out of respect for the father. On the positive side, the older brother does appear to stay with his father and continue to work the land. But the point here is that he has access to some of the same resources as the younger brother. It's not like he was suddenly poor. Let's jump into verse 25. Let's go to verse 25 here, Stephen. It says, "Meanwhile, the older son was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So the younger son has returned." Now, there is this typical suggestion here that the older brother represents the Pharisees and the religious establishment of the day. Many people believe that as Jesus was telling this parable, he's using this older brother to represent the Pharisees of the day. Could be, but as we look at this, I think it represents us. I think this is us. But this also represents a lack of identity, just coming from a different perspective than what we saw with the younger son. In this verse, the older brother is faithfully doing his duty and tending to the fields. Now, the amount of work that the older brother had may have increased because the younger son wasn't there, so now maybe the older brother is having to work twice as hard. But you can just kind of picture this. The other brother, he's been out in the field all day. He's busting his tail in the heat of the day, doing this farm work. And as he begins to come back toward the house, suddenly he hears music coming from the house. Here's what's interesting. The word used here for music in the Greek is only used here in the entire New Testament. The word for music used here is used nowhere else in the entire New Testament. It's actually the Greek word symphonia, and refers to a band and perhaps singing. Now, when we think of the word symphony, we don't think of one flute, but we think of a large group of instruments. When you go to the symphony, that's usually a big group of musicians, right? That's what it's implying here. It says symphonia. There's like a symphony playing.
Wow.
Yeah, because remember, this represents how excited the Father is to have us back, right? Now, the word for dancing here also only occurs here in the entire New Testament. So this is pointing out that this is a unique thing. This music and this dancing is not seen anywhere else in the New Testament. Now, I am a little curious here because the verse says, he heard music and dancing. How do you hear dancing? That's some pretty emphatic dancing for you to hear. Now, I've been in Africa, and there's been dancing that you could hear. There's dancing you could feel. It felt like an earthquake, honestly. But that's the scene. There's a lot of music, and there's dancing that is so vivacious, if you will, you can hear it from a distance. Now, this must have been quite a big party. But here's something I want you to think about. To get a party of this size going and to kill and butcher the fattened calf took some time. This didn't happen in an instant. It took a while to gather a symphony. Musicians had to find their instruments, had to travel to this farm. This took some time. He had to send word, hey, I want to hire you to come play. This took time. So where has the older brother been? Is this farm so large that he's gone for several days tending the flocks and wasn't even around to see all this happening? Verse 26. So he called one of his servants and asked him, what's going on? He asked one of his servants, which again shows that this is a pretty big farm to have those kinds of servants. But what's interesting here is the word for servant is not the normal word for servant or slave. The word used here in the Greek refers to a young person, even a child servant, but a young person who is not a family member. So he calls over maybe the son of one of their servants. He calls over a young person that's not part of their family. But now the verb structure in the Greek is also ongoing. It appears that the older brother is quizzing this young person for some time. It's not just, hey, what's up? Like, he's really drilling this guy. Like, what's going on? What's going on? I can hear dancing. Verse 27. Your brother has come, he replied, and your father has killed the fat calf because he has him back safe and sound. So he announces that the younger brother has come home and that the father has killed the fattened calf. Now, as remember what we talked about last week, they didn't have fattened calves just hanging around for no reason. This calf was specifically chosen and raised in a very special way for a special purpose, like a wedding or maybe the Day of Atonement feast. So this calf has been specially chosen and has been raised and being fed a certain diet for a very special occasion. So now for the older brother to hear that that calf has been killed, oh, this must be a big deal. Because we don't just kill a fattened calf for any reason. But the news of the fattened calf being killed in the same sentence as your brother is home sets off the oldest brother's anger. Verse 28. The older brother became angry and refused to go in, so his father went out and pleaded with him. Now, some have suggested that the older brother may have become angry because he feared further division of the estate. The finite thinking we talked about last week. We tend to think that the father only has so many resources, and if we squander it, then there's none left. So the older brother might be, oh no, father's going to give even more to this brother of mine. But remember, God's resources are infinite. But there is an interesting ironic twist here. The older brother stays outside the house and can't bring himself in to celebrate his younger brother's return, while the younger brother is in the house getting all the attention. Whereas it should have been the other way around. The younger brother should have been removed from the family, and the older brother should be the one that was celebrated for being faithful. Yeah. So the apparent insider, older brother, quickly becomes the outsider. You see, that's the economy of the kingdom, right? So the one who is the prodigal has now changed. You see, that's why we can't really call this the parable of the prodigal. This is the parable of the father. What the older brother thinks he has, he gives up as a result of his own fit of jealousy and lack of understanding of who he is in the Father. I want to read to you a quote from the Zondervan Bible Dictionary. It says this, according to Middle Eastern custom, the oldest son would have been the key reconciler between the father and his rebellious sibling, and yet the older brother in the story is nowhere to be seen at the time the land was divided. Moreover, to refuse to join in the banquet given by his father would have been viewed as a great public insult. Instead of confronting the father privately later, he dishonors him by arguing while the guests are present. Remember we talked about how much disgrace the younger son brought on the father by asking him to divide the estate and then what he went and did. It's equal. What the older brother does here, refusing to come in, is an equal level of disgrace to the father. So both sons are equally disgracing the father. All right? While the younger prodigal went to great lengths to bring shame and insult to the father, the older brother is now doing the same thing. Now the guests at this party must have been thinking, wow, this is some kind of dysfunctional family. But guess what, folks? He's painting a picture of the church. This is us. Right? This is us. One brother runs off to a foreign land and squanders the family's wealth, and the other brother stands here on the family land and insults the father. These are the same in their culture. It's an issue of obedience by proximity. One is disobedient a long way off, and the other is disobedient while close by. But again, folks, this is a picture of the church. Then the verse continues with, so his father went out and pleaded with him. Here again, the father takes the initiative and comes out to the older brother, just like he ran to meet the younger son while he was still a long way off. Remember, he ran and it says he fell on his neck. Well, we see something similar here. The older brother won't come in and the father goes out and he pleads with him. Now, the verb structure here is that the father made repeated pleadings to the older brother to come in. So it wasn't just a quick, hey, come in. The father is out there for a while really pleading with his older brother. Just like with the older son, we have to ask the question, why? Remember when the older son or the younger son asked for his share of the estate and took off? We're like, why? Why did he do that? Well, why is the older brother refusing to come in? Perhaps he thought the father was showing favoritism, especially considering his own faithfulness to stay with the father and continue to farm. But this comes from that place of lack of identity, right? Maybe he's unaware that his brother has returned in humility. This comes from a place of self-righteousness. I also think he fails to understand the father and his own position to the father. But he is definitely focused on himself, a self-righteousness, and unmoved by his brother's safe return. The older brother might be at the place of thinking that it is his works that keep him right with the father. Right? So the older brother has seen the younger brother go off and party and come back, and the older brother's thinking, but I have been faithful in my work, and he thinks it is his work that keeps him connected to the Father. Yeah. Hello, church. We're just talking about us. Wow. Yeah. This is the trap that we all fall into, right? We think it is our work that keeps us connected to the Father. Notice the very different emotions and reactions here between the three. The repentant prodigal, the joy, the outrageous joy of the father, and the jealous anger and self-righteousness of the older brother. Insert Church 2025. There is no greater sin here. Both sons have hearts that are equally hard toward the father. While the younger prodigal son sinned openly and blatantly, the older brother sinned quietly in his heart and while in the religious establishment, so to speak. It's their response to the Father's mercy that is different. One repents and one further hardens his heart. The Father's heart, mercy, and grace and love are the same in both cases, and that's the point that Jesus is making. Both sons have sinned, both sons have done outrageous things, but the Father's response is mercy and grace and compassion to both, and it's the same. That's the point of the parable. Jesus is saying this is what the Father is like. Doesn't matter how you sin. This is the Father's response. Mercy and grace and compassion. Verse 29. But he answered his father, look, all these years I've been slaving for you. Well, that speaks of identity, right? He doesn't see himself as a son. He sees himself as a slave. Right? All these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders, yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. We already see the misplaced identity because he sees himself as a slave, not a son, right? But his response here really starts to show his self-righteous attitude as he tries to defend his position by relating how faithful he's been, right? The older brother is trying to compare his behavior with the younger brother. Remember a few weeks ago I gave a sermon called The Sin of Comparison, how when we compare ourselves to others, there's sin in that. The older brother is also trying to compare rewards, if you will. The younger brother gets a fattened calf, and I never even got a goat. It becomes clear that his identity comes from the work that he does for the Father. He does not see himself as a son. His comment about the goat shows that he feels like his faithfulness went unnoticed and unrewarded. Do you ever feel that way in your relationship to God? Now, the comparison between the goat and the fattened calf is like the difference between a fast food burger and a 7-course meal, right? So the son is saying, you never even gave me a hamburger for my faithfulness. The younger brother was willing to be considered a slave or a servant to return home. The older brother now resents his position as a son and considers himself a slave. Jesus is revealing a subtle truth here of something that we do in our own hearts. We love to make ourselves slaves when we're sons and daughters, right? Now, there are two key issues here that I want to highlight real quickly. As this son gives this response in this verse, the first issue that we see here is a self-righteous attitude rooted in the expectation of a reward. But you see, Jesus tells at least 5 different parables where he explains that there is no reward. I want to show you something shocking here. Stephen, Luke 17:7 should be in there. Suppose one of you has a servant plowing or looking after the sheep. Will he say to the servant when he comes in from the field, come along now, sit down to eat? Won't he rather say, prepare my supper, get yourself ready, and wait on me while I eat and drink. After that you may eat and drink. Will he thank the servant because he did what he was told to do? Jesus tells 5 different parables similar to this. So here the older brother is wanting a reward, and Jesus, hey, look, in the economy of the kingdom, there's no reward like that. So the first issue here with the older brother is self-righteous attitude and expecting a reward. The second issue here is thinking that he's entitled to something even though he considers himself a slave. But rather he has access to the good things of the Father, to the Father's mercy, not because of his own behavior, but because the Father is good. He is the Son, after all. Now, the same is true for us. We don't earn things from the Father because of our behavior. We get things from the Father because of his mercy and grace, because we are his children. There is that little voice that will come and whisper to us sometimes that we don't deserve something, that we're not entitled to something. We can't have something that good. The Father's goodness is always mercy and grace, and it's always infinite. You see, if there was an award, then we would always want the bigger award. We would always compare what we got with someone else, and we would be competing for others for the reward, right? Yeah. That's why there's no reward system, because we couldn't handle it. But that's what the older brother is doing here in this situation. Here's the thing. The reward for faithful service is simply being with the Father and having access to all he has. That's your reward. The reward is having a really great Father who is full of mercy and grace. Verse 30. But when this son of yours who has squandered your property with prostitutes comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him. This continues that idea of comparison. I got nothing, and your son that went out and wasted all your resources, he's comparing still. The older brother's complaint continues, but now turns from his own hurt feelings to attacking the father's gracious treatment of the prodigal son. So the father is giving nothing but mercy and grace to the younger brother, and now the older son attacks the father for that. Would we still do that in our day, you think?
Yes.
Probably. The anger and resentment of the older brother are apparent in the language of this use. He says, this son of yours, this one is what it says there. He won't even refer to him as his brother. It's like when you're parents and your kids are misbehaving, you tell your spouse, hey, your child is misbehaving, right?
Yeah.
We've all done that one. Hey, your child's misbehaving. So here the older brother, he won't even say my brother. He's like, this son of yours, right? He even suggests prostitutes here, which were never previously mentioned in the story. How does he know that? He's been out in the field. He didn't even know there was a party happening. So he's just digging now, right? He's just trying to drum up some trouble. Notice how quick the older brother is to point out the sin in the younger brother's life while ignoring his own self-righteous attitude. Reminds me of Jesus' parable to take the plank out of your own eye first. At the end of this verse, the older brother is saying that this brother doesn't deserve grace and that the father was wrong for giving it. This shows no understanding of grace. This is why Jesus is telling the parable. Grace is always unmerited. Grace is always undeserved. We don't do anything to deserve His grace. His grace is rooted in who He is as the Father, and He gives it generously no matter what we do. Grace is always unmerited. That's why Jesus is telling this parable. To help the people to understand, no, grace doesn't come because of what you did or what you worked at. Right. It just comes because the Father is good. Yes. Verse 31. My son, the father said, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. So now the older brother went, well, this son of yours, he speaks in a way that's disrespectful. But the father's like, my son. A term of endearment, my son. The father's gracious and mercy-filled response here is what is important. This is what the parable is about. Unlike the older brother's rather terse terms and rude addressing of the father. The father also affirms the son's faithfulness with, you are always with me. Again, as with the prodigal, the response of the father is not what one would expect given the disrespect shown by the older son. But here's the key. I think this is the key to this whole thing with the older brother. Everything I have is yours. The word translated here from Greek as everything is really the word all. And it's emphatic here and stands in contrast to, you never gave me anything back in verse 29. In Greek, the way they conjugate things, you can point it back to something that happened previously. So the all here is referring back to verse 29 where he says, you never gave me anything. The NASB Bible renders it this way, all that is mine is yours. All that is mine is yours. This is what we don't understand about the Father. This is why the older brother is having such an issue. This is why we have an issue in 2025. All that the Father has is ours. There's a psalm in the Old Testament that says, the Lord owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. It speaks of vast, uncountable wealth. So the cattle on 1,000 hills. Well, guess what? God doesn't eat, and God doesn't have bills to pay. Those cattle on 1,000 hills, that's yours. That's your inheritance. All that He has is yours. God doesn't need those cattle on 1,000 hills. He doesn't eat. The father's generosity toward the younger son doesn't in any way diminish the older brother's status. Do you see that? As he has given so much to the younger son, he gave the younger son his estate, and now he's given a huge party with a fattened calf, that in no way diminishes what the older brother has. Yeah. See, that's the finite thinking again. Well, if he has all this, then what's for me? Yeah. But God is so much bigger than our finite thinking. I think the longer we are Christians, the more we lose sight of this idea that all the Father has is ours. Right? We begin to live in our little finite world. We have little struggles with our finances. We have little struggles with our families. And it begins to give us a very little myopic view of the world. All that the Father has is yours. How much is that? All of it. How much is that? More than we can handle. More than we can contain. Right? But that's the point Jesus is getting at to the older brother here. To his audience, all that the Father has is yours. And grace is always unwarranted. I want to read to you a story from Heidi Baker's book, Compelled by Love. Do you guys know who Heidi Baker is? She's a missionary in Mozambique, Africa. She's seen over 1 million people come to know Jesus. They also run a big orphanage. And here she's talking about the orphans, but it illustrates this idea here. It is an orphan spirit that causes people to shrink back, peer around the corners, and not believe that there is enough room on their Father's lap. When we first take in children from the street, they are usually little bandits whose bodies are full of lice and scabies, maybe rays too. They are generally really rotten rascals. They are not nice, sweet little children. They are not cuddly little angels. But we welcome them with open arms into our village. On the weekends, we have sleepovers with 8 of our children who have been with us for years and 8 of our new children. At first, the new ones are so timid, they won't even eat anything from the fridge. They feel they have to work for what they want, or they have to steal it. The children who know who they are with us open the fridge and help themselves to everything. The new children do not yet understand that they were chosen before the foundation of the world. They were predestined to be God's children. They do not yet understand His grace or know that they were adopted as sons through Jesus Christ in accordance with His pleasure. I love that idea of these, when they adopt these orphans in, they won't go to their fridge and take something out to eat it because they don't think it's theirs. They think they have to steal it or go hungry. Is that us? Is that us? He says all that the Father has is yours. Are we going hungry or are we stealing? Because we don't understand that all that He has is already ours. The Father never needed to give the Son a goat because the goat already belonged to Him, to the Son. Do you see that? Remember the older brother complains, "You never gave me a goat." Goat was already his. A great lie of the enemy is to beat ourselves up with the work of being faithful, perhaps even with a bit of self-righteousness mixed in. But we fail to realize that we're living in the Father's house and all that He has is ours. Verse 32, and we're done. But we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. Notice the language here. Not just my son, but this brother of yours. Their father reminds him that the younger brother is indeed a brother, not just some distant stranger. The father also again makes this statement he did in the last section, that the son is alive. Then Jesus leaves the story dangle, if you will, like what happened to the older brother? Well, because that's us, and we're still writing the story. How this ends is up to us. If the older brother refuses to repent and come inside and join the celebration, he stands to lose what he's trying to protect. While the younger brother now receives what he didn't deserve. That's grace. The sins of the brothers were different, but the grace and the mercy of the Father was the same. The Father's grace and mercy is without limit. There will always be enough for all of us. The Father reaches out to both offending parties with mercy and grace that is limitless. This all comes back to identity. With the prodigal, identity was restored with the robe, the ring, and the sandals. Remember from week 1. And with the party, the Father shows him that nothing ever happened. He's just telling all his neighbors like nothing ever happened. With the older brother, the Father reminds him that everything was already his. He never lost his identity. He just lost sight of it. Do you see the difference? With the older brother, he never lost his identity. He just lost sight of what he had. This is a trick the enemy loves to play on all of us. I want to show you a graphic to end. Stephen, there's a picture at the bottom there. I was preparing this message and I saw that hit me. Sometimes we think we're experiencing the consequences of failure when in fact we're experiencing the cost of faithfulness. That's the older brother. Amen? Amen. All right, I'll invite the worship team back up.